Hi everybody, Mike Defeo here, and I wanted to give you my take on sculpting eyes. I definitely love to draw my inspiration from classic sculpture. This is a sculpture by Jean-Antoine Houdon, who is an amazing portrait sculptor from the 18th century, and this I think is a perfect example of what makes for perfect sculpting of eyes. And the main thing you'll see that's of interest to me is the curvature of the eyelid following the curvature of the eyeball, the very distinct change from the front of the lid plane turning under to the under edge of the lid, and you can see it here on the lower lid very well as well. The other thing to keep in mind is obviously the eyeball is a sphere, or basically a sphere, and the lid is a uniform thickness of skin that is wrapping around that sphere. So you want to try to get a uniform thickness. In this case, sculpturally for effect, Houdon has added a little extra thickness to the center of the lid, and that's good. Nothing wrong with that. Gives more shadow. You can see this beautiful shadow here, which helps really set the eyeball away from the lid itself. The other really important thing about eyes is how they sit in the head. The example I'm about to give is for a human head, and it would work for a lot of creatures and aliens and things. But just knowing this planar setup that I'm about to show you is really good to have a jumping off point if you want to break away from that. So if you think of the corners and top and bottom lid as sort of north, south, east, west, when we think of which point is the furthest forward off the face towards the nose, that is, the furthest forward would be the upper lid, then the lower lid, then the inner corner, then the outer corner. And that sets the eye in the eye socket with the correct orientation. So what you'll notice is from looking up from the bottom, this inner corner is further forward than the outer corner, and a little bit more from the side here you can see the upper lid is further forward than the lower lid, and that gives you again a good placement for your eye socket. Another thing to note about the eyelid that's I think very important is that you can see here the upper lid overlaps the lower lid. You can see it here a little better too, that the lower lid curves under the upper lid. Here you see a bit of a shadow, and that definitely helps set the lower lid in place, making it not feel like a mouth or something. Another important element about sculpting eyes is this convex shape right here. You've got the brow bone that the eyebrow hair itself sits on. There's the overall socket, and in the socket you see this sort of fatty convex pad over the eye itself. Obviously Franklin in this image is much older, so this becomes fuller and droops, but what you definitely don't want to do in your sculptures is make this whole thing concave. It just does not have the right structure. Even if you make it subtle, you always want this to curve out right here, above the eye but below the eyebrow. And speaking of these corners and overlaps and so on, for me, animation wise, I don't like to have super sharp corners. So obviously in a real person there's this tear duct area right here. There's that overlap of the upper and lower lid as I had mentioned right here. And you don't necessarily want to put all this perfect anatomy in a stylized character. It doesn't really look right. But on the other hand, for me personally, you don't want to have super sharp, razor pointed edges here in the corners. It just doesn't look very natural, or at least fleshy. Even animated characters have volume and form, and they're made of skin. So you really want to avoid super sharp corners here. So hopefully that gave you some new perspective on how to sculpt eyes. No pun intended. And I hope that it was helpful. Okay, thanks a lot.